This is the Simply Home podcast, Ladies Who Build, a podcast for women by women. This is Ashley Waycott
and Michelle Mullins. After spending the last 10 years revolutionizing the construction industry and raising the bar of the contracting world, we are inviting you on our journey as we continuously learn how to be extraordinary and thrive in this industry. Now come hang with us.
Welcome to episode 23 of Ladies Who Build, how to run a successful project. So today we're going to be talking about what factors contribute to a successful project, why our specific process works, the outside factors that can make or break a project, and the details behind the curtain. Ooh. So we have a very special guest with us today. His name is Adam Isabell. And he is going to be sharing a little bit about himself here in a second. And per usual, we'll be diving into all of the fun things about Adam's background and what he sees in his job on a day-to-day. So without further ado, Adam, hello.
Hello. Hi.
Thank you for being here.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah.
So tell us all about your background and what led you to where you are today.
All right. So my name's Adam. It's good to be here. My background, funny enough, is actually in restaurants, not construction. I did it for about 20 years, I guess, from my first job as a host at a pizza place. Then I worked my way up from there, held every job in the restaurant industry. I guess it was almost 4 years ago now that I knew I wanted to change. I didn't want the restaurant hours anymore. I was getting home at 12, 1 a.m. and I knew I didn't want that anymore, especially with starting a family. So the girl I was dating at the time, who's now my wife, worked in new home construction, and she introduced me to the field manager position, which is basically the construction manager position that we have. And I loved it. It was very different than what I've been doing. There are some similarities, but I loved the hours, of course. And then it's a very rewarding job. I mean, getting clients into a new home, that can be, a client's dream is to own a home one day, and so that's what we got to do. So that was the most rewarding part. So I am originally from Nashville. We just moved to Austin in March, and I did look around for a job in the new home space, but just couldn't find anything. And then one day a recruiter called and said, "Here's this company," and I was like, "That sounds interesting. Let's do it." And here we are. And it's been great so far. It's been similar to the new home construction. It's also, extremely rewarding to, get to go through the process with the clients and then show them that finished product in the end. So, yeah, it's been good.
Adam, that made me hungry when you were talking about pizza.
I know. Well, after all that, right back to the restaurants.
I know. I mean, you have such an extensive history. I'm also curious, other than being hungry for pizza, how that prepped you, or if are there any similarities between?
I think the number one thing is in restaurants, you have no idea what's going to happen day to day. I mean, you can do all the prep. You can lay out a good game plan. You can do your pre-shift meeting, and then your freezer can break, or you can have, we had crazy things happen. One day we had a car literally drive through the front window of our restaurant. I mean,
what?
It's not always that extreme.
Yeah. You never know what's going to happen.
Someone forget to hit the brakes?
Yeah, I mean, it was weird because it was a parking lot where mostly people drove very slow, but I don't know what happened. And this girl was going fast and missed the turn and just came right through.
She really wanted a drive-in.
Right. That's what she was hoping it was for. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's I'd say the biggest similarity. It's you just never know. And I guess in renovations, that would be we do all the planning. You have the plans, the CADs like all laid out. You do like all this upfront work, and then demo happens and there's mold or there's termites or so. But that was, and I think it's similar in that in the restaurant, that was challenging, but also the most rewarding to be able to, face that head on and not like get discouraged by it or not let it defeat you really. And if you just go into it with the right mindset, then, you're like, yeah, stuff happens, but we did plan well and we're ready for it. And we've probably seen it before, not the car coming through your window, but we've probably seen a lot of the stuff before. So we're well prepared for it. So
yeah, you have to be quick on your feet in both worlds, and you have to maybe enjoy the day-to-day of what is coming or what's new or what do I have to deal with today. Because some people, they need the consistency of like, I need to know what's going to come every day in my job. And that's great, but construction's not that world.
No.
So you kind of have to enjoy that newness every day.
Yeah, I mean, even though sometimes you're like, oh, that, like, what in the world? This is like a crazy, like the house we're working on now. There's some crazy stuff, but it's like, that's, I think, where a little bit of the excitement comes from. Like, I would hate to have just a desk job where I'm doing the same thing over and over. I would not last long in that position. I would hate that.
Yeah.
So
that's why you were built for this.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, in the job you're talking about too, I think that's interesting and kind of how it plays into this episode of like some of the things that y'all found at this house. Yeah. And there are some projects that, you'll potentially not really find anything. It'll be uneventful, go really smoothly. But then there's other projects where it's like a magic show. And
yeah.
Like, what have y'all found? Y'all found cast iron?
Cast iron. Yes, we found lots of cast iron. Thinking back as far as surprises go, like we did have a house, I guess at the end of last year, where we discovered that the house had no insulation in the exterior walls at all. And we're like, well, that's different.
That's not ideal.
And the client said, she had actually got the house from her dad, and we were like, did your dad never say anything? Like, were his utility bills like through the roof? And she said, no. He said everything was normal. So we're like, well, we're here now. So would you like insulation in your exterior walls? And she said yes. So that was definitely a big surprise. But it's stuff like that all the time. It keeps you on your toes, and it's the fun part of this, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then did y'all have to like do the spray foam in the walls and?
Yes. So one day, we knew that obviously we weren't going to remove all the drywall. So our guy drilled had to have been 100 holes in the walls to do the spray foam.
Yeah, that's tough.
And so, so when drywall guy showed up, he had a slight moment of panic, like, this is not what it looked like when I did this job out or whatever. So, but it was fine. It all worked out in the end. The client was very happy, and now they have a well-insulated home.
Yeah, that's not drafty. And I mean, between the extremes here in Austin, from like the 12-degree week that we were having to the, I don't know, 100 and something.
I couldn't believe that her dad had said that everything seemed normal and he didn't have a problem heating or cooling his house. I was shocked.
Yeah, so he probably wears like a full-on parka.
Yeah,
in the winter. He's like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
She's like, Dad, it's 58 in here.
I'm content.
Yeah.
I could see someone from that generation being like, what do you mean? I'm good.
Yeah. You just figure it out.
Yeah, tough it out.
Yeah.
Okay, so as a construction manager, we have a little bit of a different process. So you're partnered with a project manager. And so both of y'all tackle one project together or multiple projects together. But what is one thing as a construction manager whose job is to be in the field to really making sure that the control is well managed on these projects with vendors and the work? Explain a little bit the different types of things you have to juggle on a daily basis to make sure that that project's successful?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing when I was thinking about this, the first thing that popped into my head was juggling vendors and or clients' personalities. And because I guess like we were talking about earlier, you can do all the planning in the world, but you never really know how you're going to work with a client until you're like in it for a few weeks and you like get to talking to them. And then, you know, one thing I've seen is a client who says in the beginning, you know, we always ask the question, how involved do you want to be? You know, is this like a completely hands-off experience for you, or do you want to be here every day and you're going to be all up in it with us? And I've seen that they say one thing and then the project starts and it's like completely opposite of what they said. So there's juggling that, and really as the construction manager, you know, the way our process goes, there really isn't supposed to be that many points of contact between construction manager and client. But what I've seen is that it just happens. Honestly, it's like, you know, because we can't tell them not to be at their house, right? So, and if they're there and they see me, then, you know, they're going to ask questions. So it's trying to figure out how to work best with them and then also with the vendors. And then I think another part of that is, and I've just seen this recently, is trying to figure out, there's like a juggling act with the client comes in contact with the vendor. And it's like, you know, we just talked about this yesterday in the team meeting. I'd say maybe discourage that because for a number of different reasons. So just trying to figure out how to navigate that has been a little interesting. But yeah, I think obviously there's 1,000 different things you have to juggle during a project, but that was just the one that really stuck out to me when I first thought about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are so many people involved in a remodel.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, yeah, so many people. And so you're right. You have to, every single person's different in the way that they operate. And I think as a construction manager too, you have to get to know your vendors really well, because you might have to be very descriptive with one vendor, and then another vendor is just like, give me the high level, give me the plans, I'll let you know when I'm done. Or, and another has to be like coaxed and followed up with, and did you do your job properly? So it's like then understanding who you have to do that with. And that takes a lot of time too.
Yeah. And it's always, it's different than a lot of industries in that I remember talking with a leader client one day and they were like, oh yeah, well, we're in project management. You know, what's the difference? I remember there was a difference in our process of like, oh, well, why can't this just be like a 3-week project, right? And one of the variables that I was describing to them was specifically that we're not working with people we're working with professionals and experts at what they do, but not professionals in like, I'm going to wear a suit and I'm going to say all the right things and show up 10 minutes early to my meeting and blah, blah, blah. We're working in construction. And so like we always have to cater to all their personalities and to all their isms and to how they like to work. And it's not like other industries where we all just meet at a meeting, we're professional, we say what we need to say, we sign the contract, and that's how we move. It's just not that way. And so you're navigating all those people.
Yeah. I mean, there's one guy I have in mind who, even if he's working on one end of the house and somebody else is on the other, he's like, I want to be in the house alone.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to work.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to set my stuff up, which takes like an hour, get his music going. And he's like, I just want the house to myself. He does great work, but he wants to, he has a certain process, and that's just, it is what it is. We know if we have him, nothing else should be scheduled. We should maybe do a couple more days added to his time because he's slow, but he's great. And, and, you know, but that's just it's just another thing to manage. Like managing the schedule is a huge part of this. And that's just another weird little thing that you would never know that, especially as a newer person.
Yeah.
But then after a few jobs, you're like, okay, now I know if this guy's here, then, you know exactly what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to make a lot of accommodations to all of their needs, and they have a lot of needs.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, the only example I could think of is like a musician or somebody that's going to go play, and they're like, I only want red M&Ms. I want the temperature to be 73 degrees in my room, right? We're working with like, in a sense, a lot of those, sometimes like 30 to 40 on a project.
Yeah.
Yep. They all want it their way.
Yes, they do.
But I guess this is a really good segue into the question, if I'm a potential client and no matter whatever I'm working on, whatever the project is, do you think that all clients should hire a GC?
So I think mostly yes. I think probably like 95% of clients should. And I think mainly that's because, you're like, I'm just doing my bathroom. It's small. Like it's just a simple swap out of the tub to a shower. Well, it's like, no matter what you think you're getting into over here, there's almost always a surprise behind the wall. There's definitely something that, you can Pinterest all the things you want or watch all the YouTube videos you want, but there's going to be something that you don't know about, and you're not going to know how to fix, or you don't know what even steps to take, or who would even do it, or who, like, you just don't know. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? Like I was saying earlier, there's a good chance that either myself or somebody on the team has seen what it is you're going through, and we'll have answers, or we'll at least know where to get the answers. So I think, it sounds fun, and it can be fun. I think it's fun to do renovations, but like, there's definitely going to be something that goes wrong, and that's what we're here for. And that's why you should absolutely hire a GC, unless it's just like paint,
right?
Yes.
Or like, if you want to like swap out hardware on your cabinets. Sure.
Right.
Other than that, give us a call.
Yeah. There's been not like one story I've ever heard anybody ever say that if they did manage their own project, because people do it all the time, but it's either never turned out well, it was a negative experience, they always had something negative to say about it, how hard it was, how long it took. It was never like, that went really well, because I'm in project management in this industry, and I just knew, I just did it, no one said no one ever, that just doesn't happen. So yeah, I think that's a really good point too, is like, we either know the answer to a problem or we know where to find the answer. Yeah.
And the people that we know to hire to do the job the right way the first time. If you're not in the industry, what do you just do? A Google search and like hope maybe there's some good reviews on somebody, but obviously most of the vendors we've worked with for a while. So, we know exactly who needs to be there and when they need to be there and what they need to do.
And like what pricing is, what normal pricing looks like. How do you know if you're getting gypped?
Yeah, and what to expect pricing wise and quality wise, and just the overall work. Like you would know looking at so many bathrooms throughout your life, like, why did you do that? That looks really weird, or that's not normal. Whereas somebody else would just believe them. And I was also thinking about our invoicing structure, right? We do all the due diligence to ensure we have proper legality contracts. We follow proper payment systems and structures, invoicing. I mean, I'm thinking about projects I've managed on my own, and it was so stressful because someone would want this percentage down and I'd have to keep track of the other percentage, and then they added something, and then, so all of a sudden you're like, you put on your like accountant visor and you're, hitting the calculator button and you're like, wait, what? I'm confused. And you have to keep track of your checks, and homeowners don't have to do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I was just thinking about everything behind the pretty stuff. Like if you want to just say redo your shower, you're like, well, I saw this tile that I love, so I'm gonna take the old off and put the new on. Well, it's like, okay, so when you demo the old tile, you don't know what's behind there. With us, we know that there needs to be like, a proper drainage and like maybe a Schluter system or a red guard. And like if you would have said either of those things before I was in this industry, I was like, I have no idea what you just said. Schluter what? And like,
I'd be like, I don't need it.
yeah, exactly.
Hard
it's like,
pass. That sounds weird.
It's like, oh, is it like an extra cost? Well, yeah. Well, it's like, I'm good. Well, it's like, okay, well, get ready for some rot behind because there's gonna, water inevitably finds a way to get, where it shouldn't be if it's not done right the first time. So like, that's another thing. It's like, we know all the stuff behind the walls, and then you may know all the pretty stuff, as we say, but like, trust us, you're going to want the stuff behind the walls done correctly, or you're going to be redoing this in a month.
I mean, that is the stuff that matters, actually, is the stuff behind the walls. And I do typically remind that to anyone that's talking to us about potentially working with us is, listen, no matter who you're interviewing or whoever you're talking to, making sure that they're properly waterproofing, because we don't mess with, water and fire and, having licensed electricians, like plumbers, don't skimp on that. I did want to ask too about what can make a project go south, or what kind of surprises you've seen, which we kind of already have been talking about. Was there anything else that you wanted to add to that?
This was, again, the first thing I thought of was if a client sees things before we do, or if they see things and they don't know that we've addressed it or we are addressing it. I think what I've seen is there can be a loss of trust there, and that can make it seem like the project's sort of going off the rails. But I think it's easy enough to sort of get it back on track, to gain that trust back. If you say, I'm sorry that you saw that first, or I'm sorry that, we did see it, but like, we just didn't let you in on it. Because I think if the client did know about like every single little thing, they would probably be overwhelmed by it. I think that can make it seem like the project has gone south in a hurry, but I also think it's a pretty easy one to get back, to gain the trust back.
And especially as a client, they might think something is a big deal when I think we were talking about this with the team the other day, but like the baseboards may look really awful, but you just need to caulk them. Something may seem, it looks so bad or it's so unfinished, but in actuality, you have a plan.
Yep.
The team has a plan, and the client, if they trust you in the process, they know that you're going to finish it out and you'll handle it.
Yeah, like just at the project we have, the big project we have going on now, there was some issues with the plumbing, and so that it seemed like it was going south in a hurry. The client had lost faith in the plumber, and the client was like, okay, before drywall, I want to test all of the plumbing to make sure it works and it runs properly. And I'm like, okay, we passed inspection, the plumbing is done the right way, but let me just show you. And I actually walked him into the kitchen and was like, here's your rough-in plumbing for your kitchen sink. You can't test it. There's no way to turn this on. Look at it. Like, you see what it is. It's just two little copper pipes sticking out of the wall. I promise you. I said, listen, it's all part of the process. Like, this is why we have inspections. This is why we do these quality control checks. Like, you can see that's the PEX lines that we require. Like, and after a minute, he's like, okay, I understand. It's part of the process. And I said, and you know what? If by chance something does go wrong with the plumbing, guess what? There's another process for how to get that fixed. And he's like, well, there's going to be drywall. I said, yes, we'll take the drywall off. And then there's a process for getting it back on and getting it back to new again. And he just, he just wanted to test his plumbing. I said, we can't, but it's part of the process and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I've wanted to do that before too, because we've had a situation where a rough-in was manufactured poorly.
Mm-hmm.
It just came in and it didn't work. And there's no way to know until it's done and it's trimmed out.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing is like the chances of that happening are so small and so rare that for us to build a process to try and test the rough-in parts, it just doesn't make sense moving forward. But that one instance, it was a bummer for sure.
Yeah.
But those little things can happen where plumbing parts are manufactured incorrectly, and what do you do?
It's hard because everybody is so different. And we've talked about a lot about personalities and client personalities, and it's hard to tell someone, don't freak out over this or don't worry about this because we've got it, because people just worry about different things, so you can't control that. But I think to your point, it really does boil down to the communication that we're constantly providing for the client. And I remember being a project manager, we have this process of going through the expectations in the beginning. Here's what you can expect. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what might happen. But at the beginning of a project, a client's really excited. They just want to start. They're like, yeah, whatever. That's not going to happen to me. It's going to be fine. And so I remember that it was always intentional for me to keep repeating those expectations of like, hey, remember when I said this was going to happen or this could happen? Hello, what's happening? And so it's always like, it was just always
We're
like,
here.
Yes, like we know what might happen. Here's how we're going to handle it. But it's hard to not have people freak out because again, they're spending a lot of money. And so, the understanding of the emotion being there is okay, but we have to be there to kind of mitigate it and be like, this is the part of the process. And I always wish we could just like do remodels with like the big blue bus and we could just move it and then they can move out. And you're like, here's your big, beautiful project.
Move that bus.
Yeah, move the bus. Because they're like seeing the inner workings and it's like, that's not the pretty part.
Yeah. I mean, the unknown is scary. It's always going to be scary. And some people can handle the unknown better than others.
Yeah.
And other people like a little bit more control.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. I had a good talk with this guy just yesterday, actually, because, he was the one who said he wanted to be pretty hands off and now he's there every day. And we get messages every day from him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to him. I was like, this is like my baby right now. This is like my big project right now. I'm like, I'm going to be here every day. And he's just one where he wants to know that he's being heard. He wants to know that we care. And so when I said, this is like my baby, this is my like main project right now, he was just thrilled. I mean, he was, he was like, oh my gosh, Adam, that's so good to hear. And he shared a little bit about why it's so important. Like him and his wife, they've only had apartments or they like were in this like shared living situation. So this is their first house together, not an apartment, and where they've got to like pick out things on their own. And so it's obviously very important to him. So when I said what I said about it being my baby right now, he was very happy. So, but that explains, I think that explains a lot about why he is the way that he is, being there every day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big investment.
Oh yeah.
I get it.
I think that's what makes you good at your job though, is understanding where people are coming from and their intention. Because if you weren't listening to where he was coming from and what was important to him, then it probably would be more personal, right? Where you're like, what's the big deal? Like, what's the problem?
But he had reasons behind it.
But having that insight, just helps you, that relationship with the client.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Is there something that you do specifically on a daily or weekly basis that is imperative to the success of a project that maybe a client doesn't see or would ever know about or see? I mean, there's a lot.
I know. I'm sure there's a lot of things
behind the scenes.
Basically, what's your specific process where you're like, okay, I've set this job up well. I feel good about this. Or when you reflect back on projects that have gone well, what did you do in your process to make sure that happened? I
think so. a part of it for me is, we get the plans. I will go through all the bid emails, see like each vendor scope, but like a big and a huge important part for me is actually it's the PM meeting. Because so for me, I am a visual learner. I can sit and look at a CAD plan all day long. But once I get into the space, we're with the client and we're actually walking through, like, we're demoing these things, or this is where these are gonna go, like whatever it may be. That part of the process is the most important to me, to actually be in the space, to try to, or you feel what it is now and you get from the client what they want it to feel like, what they want it to look like. So that's a huge part of the process for me. And then the next thing that I'd say is the most important for me is when the vendor, or if it's the vendor's first time at the project, to go walk the scope with them. That, I think, I have found is one of the most important parts of my job. Because I think what I found early on was a lot of the vendors were, no matter how much work was done up front with the planning with them, like over on the sales side, or them, hearing about the scope for the first time, I was seeing some of them would get to the house and then they would call me and be like, what am I doing here? And I'm like, did you read the email? Did you go over the plans? Like, I know you have all this information. I know you do. And they're like, I didn't check the email, or I didn't really look at the plan, or like, I didn't really understand the scope. I'm like, okay, no problem. But I've found like that I've like made sure that's like a high priority thing for me to be at every single time. And I think it's crucial to getting things done right the first time. So yeah, that's basically the process, in the beginning. And then like when the project gets going, there's obviously, lots of quality checks for accuracy. And like we talked about earlier, there's a lot of that, managing the schedule and managing lots of people's weird little quirks and personalities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or like, maybe you don't do this. I did this back in the day. Remember how often my phone went off with alarms because I would be like, I got to follow up with the plumber. Did he actually go? Did he send me photos? And so I have a short-term memory loss. Like I like to say, it's not. But I like have to remind myself all the time to follow up with these people because I needed to make sure by the end of the day what I was telling the client was actually true and accurate. But behind the scenes, I'm like, calling all these people. And,
right.
Yeah.
No, I do the same thing. My phone is loaded with alarms.
Yeah.
For like work stuff and personal stuff. There's probably like 7 alarms on both of my phones.
Right.
And I'm surprised none of them have gone off right now. Oh, do not disturb. Do not disturb.
Yeah.
But I think like there's so many things clients don't see that's happening on the back end. Mm-hmm. And I remember it was hard not to get emotional about, I'm like, oh, well, are you managing this? Or are you doing this? I'm like, you don't even know. My alarm's going off like crazy. I am managing it, Yeah.
I'm being buzzed all the time.
All the time.
But that's just smart management of, to me, how you set yourself up for success, because it's impossible to remember that while you have other things going on. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know I can get sucked into something and then I come back up and I'm like, what time? Should I be in a meeting? What time is it? Right? It's just hard to remember all of that, but it's a great strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to even put like the littlest things in my calendar, but also I used the alarms all day, every day. Yeah.
Where we be without our iPhones?
What do you wish all clients knew about a remodel project?
I wish all clients knew that things are going to break. Things are going to be messy. Things are gonna happen that you could have never planned for or imagined. But if you have patience and you do have trust, I think, in your GC, then in the end, you're going to get hopefully exactly what you wanted. And, it's going to be a rewarding process. But the big things, I think, are it's probably going to be messier. It's going to take longer, and things aren't going to go the way that you thought they should or would go, but that it's okay. And that's what we're here for.
And that's what you should expect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that really kind of hits it all on the nail for sure.
On the head.
Is
the nail of the head.
What'd I say?
On the nail. That's very perfect for construction. Have you had a favorite project so far?
I have had a favorite project.
What type of project was it?
A whole home. I mean, we didn't do a lot of work in the bedrooms. The bedrooms just got new floors, new paint, some new lights. But we did a full kitchen reno and then bathrooms. That was, for a number of reasons, it was my favorite. It was an awesome neighborhood. The clients were awesome. The house was awesome. The vendors were great. Things went wrong along the way. This was the house that didn't have insulation in the exterior walls. But I think the main reason why that was my favorite project was because of the clients. Honestly, they were so easy to work with. They were patient. They were understanding. And it was really the project itself. I mean, they had picked out some great finishes in their house. Like, it just turned out to be a beautiful home. But the clients we work with, I think, go a long way with whether or not you can look back on the project and say, yeah, I really enjoyed that, or that really tested me.
Yeah, that's so true. Because we've done some beautiful projects, but then maybe the clients, were a little bit different. And so then you're like, well, I wish I loved that project as much as I wanted to love it. Yeah, so they can totally, it can make a successful one for sure.
Yeah, and making sure clients are the right fit for us happens a lot in the beginning of the process, they know if we're going to be a good fit. Anyone who's meeting our team on the front end is similar to our team on the construction end. Making sure we establish that it is a right fit and making sure that they're comfortable with our process, because if they aren't comfortable with it, then and they're going to be fighting us every step of the way, then it's just not going to be good for them or us.
Yeah, for sure.
Or if what we've noticed too, the relationship that the clients have with each other, like the husband and wife, how they interact with each other can actually be very dependent on how the project is going to go. Because if one person's like, oh, I'll handle all the communication and the payments, but then the other person's left in the dark, we kind of are like, wait, are you not telling your partner about this? Like, are we supposed to be telling your partner about this? Like, who's telling who about this? So it's like the communication they have between each other can probably also make or break a project.
Yeah, it was this project I was talking about. It was funny because I would say 95% of the decision making was on her, and he didn't care at all. He was just like, the one thing, there's two things that were very important to him. And it was the ceiling fan height in his bedroom.
Love that. Hilarious.
That was first.
So
and the other thing was the height of his outlet for his TV.
Oh my God.
In the living room.
So
Priorities.
And literally we would be talking with her and she'd be like, oh, I need to call my husband, or I need to FaceTime him. And we're like, we know that you probably don't, but okay, you can call him. And I know he's going to say, I don't really have an opinion. He said that 1,000 times.
I don't have an opinion.
Except that ceiling fan and that outlet.
that he cares to be breezy and cool and have his
And he wants
TV.
relaxed eyes when he's watching his TV.
Yes.
That is so funny.
Anyways, well, that's a wrap.
All right.
Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah.
for
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It was a good
episode
time.
23. Yeah, thank you.
Now that you are hooked to the podcast, you are probably thinking, how can I learn more? We'll sign up for our monthly newsletter to see our newest remodels and the best tips for a stress-free home renovation.
With a few easy clicks, you will get to go even more in depth with us as we go behind the scenes with life, projects, and our team. Go to simplyhome.co for the show notes to sign up. See you next time. Bye, y'all.